you. Dean Russell.
Thank you, Chair. This session is deeply personal to me. Over the past 2 years, I've had family, friends, colleagues and constituents all have various forms of cancer. Some of them are no longer with me, some of them miraculously are. And so I've seen from the outside the whole pathway and the impact cancer has on individuals. Could you just explain from a patient point of view? Because I think most people don't go to their GP thinking they've got cancer. It's probably one of the rare times where they haven't looked it up beforehand, and most people go in with a thought of their diagnosis. Could you just explain to me from a basic level, when a patient goes to the GP, what's that process there to get to the point of a cancer diagnosis, especially rare cancer diagnosis? If I could start with you, Anna, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the cancers that I represent, quite often people go to their GP with quite what can be quite often seen as vague symptoms. It might be back pain, it might be bowel problems, it might be headaches, and I think those are often, put down to a lot of other conditions, particularly if people are younger or they don't kind of fit the profile. And what we hear about far too often is people going back and back to their GP over a number of months or even years, saying that they're starting to feel worse, but they're not being referred. And I think that's often because we do have some excellent guidelines that are around kind of referral for cancer patients through normal routes if you've got a kind of red flag symptom. But if you have one of those vaguer symptoms, often, it can be put down to something else. They might go and see a number of different specialists before they're actually diagnosed with the right cancer. And that's why we think it's so important to have the rapid diagnostic clinics that have been brought in to try and speed up diagnosis, to have a place where someone with those vague symptoms that can be referred to, so that they can try and sort of speed up that pathway and stop that sort of traumatising issue, actually, where people have often gone back and back to their GP, and particularly if they're diagnosed when they're no longer operable, where they're terminal or metastatic in their disease, and to feel that actually they were going back and back to see someone and that diagnosis was missed is just devastating for them and their family, and is something that we hear about all too often at the services, at the charities that I represent. And I think also what's really crucial is the investment that we need to find better ways to diagnose and test for these diseases earlier. It's really important that we bring in issues such as sort of lung cancer screening where we can. We're starting to see more the use of cytosponge for Barrett's esophagus disease, which is an early precursor of esophageal cancer. We know the surveillance that can be carried out for liver cancer for a lot of the patients that have cirrhosis. And we know for cancers such as stomach, brain and pancreatic that we need more investment in developing biomarkers that can really help pick up these cancers at a much earlier stage when they're not advanced and when we can treat them.
And in terms of thank you. And in terms of the barriers that you've seen for patients, those that do go back and back and back, is there a pattern there? Is it because the GPs are, either aren't picking up on it or don't know the pathways to get them referred? I mean, what's the barrier there? Because I'd imagine if a GP thinks a patient could have cancer, they're not going to not want to refer them. So, what do you think the barrier is, if you don't mind?
I think one of the barriers is, I think we have to be honest and know that actually within a GP's career, lifetime, for most of the cancers I represent, they'll only see a few of each of those times during their career. So I think we do need tools to help GPs, better tools. We need there is a use of decision-making tools that can help people kind of put in the symptoms and see the risk of cancer. As I said, we need different pathways into vague symptom clinics which they know they can refer people to, and they might pick up cancer or they might pick up another condition, but it's better pathways where GPs can refer these people that are coming back to them. And I think we probably need a system where we make sure that people don't come back and back a number of times. If you come back a couple of times, you need to be referred to something like a rapid diagnostic clinic. I think that would make a huge difference. As well as I said, we need the development of tests to help GPs better triage which patients need to be through a blood test, which cancers need to be referred for further tests and investigations and scans would really, really help.
Fantastic, thank you. Jane, if I may ask you the same question. I mean, obviously you work with a huge number of smaller charities. Is that the story you hear as well, this repeated?
I think Anna's described it very well, the kind of visit to the GP experience. I would just add in that I think what would be helpful, and there has been some work on this, is to try and build the awareness of rare and less common cancers amongst the general population, because what we've seen, and there's through the NHS Help Us Help You campaigns, there has been a focus recently on abdominal and urological, which has helped because they're vaguer and everything else. But if we had a more empowered and powerful patient population, and touch where they're not patients now, and frankly I agree with you, who wants to be one? I mean, I don't. if they were better informed and could explain themselves a bit better, that would be helpful. But that's about a broader knowledge and awareness, and also might help people working in primary care, and it's quite rightly identified. Some people will only see certain cancers 2 or 3 times in their career. So I would suggest that we support those awareness campaigns and also try and, in some ways, in many ways, cancer is still a disease of age, and we're talking about a population that doesn't want to bother their GP. And, as Professor Baldwin's already referenced, the stay away kind of messaging was pretty strong, stay away from the system during the COVID thing. So I think we need to try and support people to come forward to try and have a bit of better knowledge, awareness, track what people do know, so that when they get to, when they've made that phone call, because you don't want to make that phone call because you don't want the news that they're going to give you even if you get it, kind of thing, to at least to be able to maybe come forward a bit earlier and get across the message that the sooner you get there, honestly, even if it's not what you're hoping for, probably the outcome will be better. I know that's hugely sweeping generic, but I do think that's a message that needs to come through.
But thank you. In terms of those sort of symptoms, though, is there anywhere online where you can sort of almost go on and check? Because whenever I did a lot of work in websites for the NHS years ago, and I remember there were thousands of websites all for the same thing, all telling you different information. Is there other than the NHS website, is there a source to go to?
Well, I would commend to you that you have to understand that to actually put in something that specifies a cancer, and a type of cancer, kind of even worse, then you're mentally well ahead of where you are before you get to the GP, so to speak. There are some trials there going on. Most of our member charities have a patient support helpline, so once you're through the system and know what it is you're kind of facing, then there's a good deal of support there, and that plays very much to the point Katie made about support as you go through it. It's not just symptoms helplines, but there are a good deal. And there are some trials going on amongst alliances for cancer symptoms hotlines, which I believe is what they're called. And we are sharing information from the charity sector, having had a lot of experience in that, with the alliances, and sharing learn sessions and hoping to make those better. So yes, there are, but I think I'd caution too much about Googling things that you
that's
not
what
sure
I'm always wary of.
Where you're no,
Yeah.
Well. It's a balance. Some people are happy at Googling, others are happy at not.
It's a rabbit hole of misinformation.
Indeed.
Sometimes, isn't it? Mayor, can I ask a slightly different question, actually? If I may start with you, as we were already discussing this. I've got a constituent, and I've heard of this many times, where there's a trial drug or something in another part of the world that they can't access in the UK, and they have to do fundraisers to raise tens of thousands of pounds sometimes to be able to access it. Is that something you see regularly, and is there a way of solving that problem? If there's a potential solution somewhere else, not forcing people in the UK to have to then fundraise to access it. I just wondered if you'd got any thoughts on that from your experience.
I think it's a very upsetting experience if that is the case, and it has been the case sometimes. I would, again, from a patient perspective, try and urge a bit of caution in that. What it does touch on, though, is the requirement really to try and speed up access to the newer drugs within England and the UK, and that takes on to a whole other range of how NICE works or doesn't, and MHRA. But I think if you're in that situation, it's extraordinarily sad. I think industry can step up and help more if that is the case. Maybe it's not their drug, maybe it is, but I think there's all sorts of potential solutions there. But I think it's very sad if you feel you have to take often a younger member of the family out of the system. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have any more, Dean?
I was going to. If there's time,
yeah,
yes.
Sure.
Professor Baldwin, I was just interested in your take. Obviously, lung cancer. Everyone seems to know about it, but no one seems to want to go to the GP with a cough, especially if they've had it over a period of time. I just wonder whether, from your perspective, are you also seeing this sort of lack of pathways from GPs through to the experts to the diagnosis and so on? Is that rooted in people not coming to the GP explaining the symptoms, or I'd just be interested in your take on all this.
So yes, absolutely. Even before COVID, it was a problem in the sense that people were afraid to recognise symptoms, afraid to make that step to go forward. They're often from deprived groups as well, so they don't necessarily access the GP services very easily. They're not insistent quite often. And then it's not an easy thing, as we all know, to get to see a GP. I mean, there are barriers there anyway. Once the GP is involved, then things should then progress. But there are still delays. I see it all the time in clinic. And with COVID, I've been in lung cancer for quite a long time. It was like working 20 to 25 years ago. That's what it was like. Late stage disease, horrible presentations, all sorts of things that we'd actually forgotten about because we'd made so much progress on this early diagnosis pathway. We can go so much further though, and we really do need, as I'm trying to emphasise, access, easy access, but it's got to be linked with the awareness programmes so that people know if they finally recognise that they've got a symptom they've got to sort out, which may not be cancer, then they can get in easily. And that's the crucial thing. That's the first step, very important.
And in terms of the UK, where do we sit globally? I mean, for anyone who is worried, do we is the diagnosis in the UK good compared to other countries? Where are we in terms of comparison?
I think there's the International Cancer Benchmarking Partnership is the study to go to there, and that shows consistently that the early diagnosis is one of the leading things that we don't do terribly well in the UK, and that's one of the main reasons why we're behind the other countries, equivalent countries. We also do diagnose more of our cases, I think, and the one thing that the International Cancer Benchmarking Partnership does is based on registry data, with very good registry, but if you never make the diagnosis, you don't register them as cancers. And we've shown that if you increase the number of chest x-rays as a general practitioner, you detect more lung cancer and more people, importantly, that have a very short survival. So, there's a lot of cancer there which we don't necessarily recognise, and I think in other countries that may not be recognised. That might be part of the explanation, but the main explanation is that we're just not very good at diagnosing early. I think that's the key.